Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. A federal program that gives priority to Native American and other socially and economically disadvantaged business owners is under fire. Most recently, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says he will take a sledgehammer to what is referred to as the 8A Business Development Program in his department. That same program is being scrutinized across the board as well, putting billions of dollars that now go to tribal businesses into question. Is this the end of the 60-year-old program designed to help disadvantaged populations? We'll hear what the experts have to say after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Tribes are among those expressing condolences to the family of 37-year-old Alex Peretti, who was fatally shot over the weekend by federal agents in Minneapolis. Tribes are also raising concerns for their citizens in the Twin Cities as the Trump administration's immigration actions continue in Minnesota. In a statement, the Mille Lacs Band offered condolences and said it's standing in solidarity with its band members and other Minneapolis residents. Tribal leaders are urging their members to carry tribal IDs and report any ICE interactions to the tribe as leaders meet with federal, state, and local officials. The Spirit Lake Nation, Crow Creek Sioux Tribe, Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and Standing Rock Sioux Tribe issued a joint statement expressing condolences and said they stand in solidarity with Minnesota communities. The tribes say recent federal actions in Minnesota include the taking of a Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate member, but they did not provide additional information. The tribes say leaders are in contact with federal agencies, and they're urging tribal citizens to prioritize safety. A teacher who was convicted of sexually abusing Hopi boys for nearly a decade was recently denied parole after the tribe and the U.S. Attorney for Arizona sent a letter opposing his release. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrozio reports.
John Boone was hired as a teacher in 1979 at a Hopi school run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In 1987, the FBI found photos and videotapes of 142 nude boys at his home, and Boone was sentenced to life in prison.
His name is still widely known on the reservation, even though it's been close to 40 years. We still continue to suffer to this day.
That's Hopi Chairman Lamar Kivema.
Unfortunately, we've lost some, either to suicide or to alcohol or substance abuse. Nothing will ever make up for what was done. It's an open wound that'll never go away.
U.S. Attorney Timothy Courchain has watched this case closely, even sending a letter to the U.S. Parole Commission in tandem with Hopi leadership.
And with the understanding that that federal special trust responsibility doesn't end at the sentencing.
Courchain also credits his tribal liaison, Kyoko Patterson, who is Navajo, for paying close attention.
She really stays on this for us.
The U.S. agreed to pay $13 million to 58 victims. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrozio.
For the first time in 40 years, a Native person is wearing the crown of Miss Rodeo, North Dakota. Brian Bull of Buffalo's Fire has the story.
24-year-old Jalen Hicks of Dunn Center scored highest in the categories of horsemanship, appearance, and personality. She's competed twice before, but persevered and will now travel the rodeo circuit across the country. Hicks is one-quarter French-Canadian Chippewa of the Turtle Mountain Band. The last known native rodeo queens were Janet Voigt in 1986 and Audrey Hall in 1954. Both were with the three affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara. Hicks says she's happy to continue this representation.
I love the fact that Native American culture has such a heavy influence on the Western industry, whether you want to look at the horsemanship, the jewelry we see such a big influence, the leather work, the fringe we wear on our jackets, that's all from Native American culture.
Hicks was declared Miss Rodeo North Dakota last year and was formally coronated earlier this month. Besides educating people about rodeo culture and the Western industry, Hicks will also promote awareness of Angelman syndrome, a genetic condition that affects her niece, Sissy. For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The Trump administration is working to halt billions of dollars in federal contracts for Native businesses. Officials are putting a microscope on the Small Business Administration's 8A program, which was created some 60 years ago to help socially and economically disadvantaged small business owners. The administration has already suspended over 1,000 contracts following an audit to sift out what it says is fraud. Some Alaska Native corporations and tribes rely heavily on the program and secure billions of dollars in federal contracting. Today on our show, we'll speak with leaders within the 8A program, and later in the hour, we'll hear about alleged abuse of the 8A program uncovered by a journalist's investigation. It's one of the examples federal officials point to as evidence of widespread fraud. Are you a business owner who participates in the 8A program? Or maybe your community relies on federal contracts to support its economy? You can join this conversation. Give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's hear some of what Secretary Hegseth says about the 8A program in the Defense Department. This audio is edited for time. If you would like to listen to the entire video, you can watch it with a link to our website, nativeamericacalling.com. Here again is Secretary Hegseth talking about what he says are shell corporations taking a cut for defense contracts and not doing any work.
Providing these small businesses with opportunities is a laudable goal. But over the decades, as it happens, the 8A program has morphed into swamp code words for DEI, race-based contracting. And here's the worst part. In many, many instances, these socially disadvantaged businesses, they don't even do work. They take a 10%, 20%, sometimes 50% fee off the top and then pass the contract off to a giant consulting firm, commonly known as Beltway bandits. For decades, this program, 8A, has been a breeding ground for fraud, and this administration is finally doing something about it. Now, in the Pentagon, $100 million sole source contracts go out the door to these 8A firms almost every day. $100 million sole source contracts go out our door to these 8A firms almost every day without any competition or opportunity for anyone else to bid. The Department of War is required by law to do almost $100 billion worth of contracts per year with small businesses, including 8A firms. Seems 8A is quite important. But we're not required to pay enormous brokerage fees, only to have these firms pass those contracts along to giant consulting companies. And we won't. We're not doing this anymore. So effective immediately, I'm ordering a line-by-line review of every small business sole source 8A contract that is over $20 million. And we'll look at everything smaller than that, too.
That's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth in his announcement that he will scrutinize federal contracts to disadvantaged and tribal business entities. Let's now meet today's guests. Joining us first from Denver, Colorado is John Panamaroff. He is the co-chair of the Native American Contractors Association and CEO of Command Holdings. He's a citizen of the native village of Ufognak. John, hello, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Good to be here, Sean. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for asking, John. And joining us from Washington, D.C., we have Kevin Allis. He is the founder and president of Thunderbird Strategic and former CEO of the National Congress of American Indians. He's a citizen of Forest County, Potawatomi. Kevin, hello. Welcome back to Native America Calling.
Hey, good morning. Great to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you both on the show. And John, I want to begin with you. Let's talk about what we just heard, the audio from Secretary Hegseth. He mentioned shell corporations fronting a business that doesn't actually do the work they've been contracted to provide. They might instead subcontract it to another firm that isn't an 8A company. Does the 8A program have any method to prevent that from happening?
Again, one of the things that, we have to be real cognizant of here is anytime that a company is brought into the 8A program, they have annual reviews. They're constantly looking at the different amount of work share that they have to do. And again, there are mechanisms in which the government is taking an active and proactive approach to make sure that these pass-throughs aren't happening. Now, with that said, is there things that have and could happen? Sure. And again, I think one of the things we at the Native American Contractors Association want to be real cognizant of is we're not looking for fraud, waste, and abuse. I think there has been kind of this brought in ideology or indulgence when it comes to the 8A program. But in fact, the 8A program, I think, is one of the few tools that the Department of Defense has to inject competitive pressure on a competitive environment that really is kind of dominated by a small number of massive incumbents. So by looking at this, trying to be able to drive these forward, I actually think that by taking away our 8A programs is actually giving a gift to our primes. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but I haven't seen as much of these pass-throughs that they've seen through just in my years of doing that. Be very interested to see what kind of reports that they have coming through. So at NACA, we're really trying to keep an open mind and open perspective, but we also want to remind everybody that, this are tools, these 8A programs are tools and levers that the department has to get better pricing, faster delivery, and greater responsiveness by Department of Defense or Department of War as we go forward. So I haven't seen that, and I do believe that the SBA and other areas have mechanisms. But again, I don't want to be too quick to judge to see what kind of reports. We all just turned in an audit that came out here back on the 19th of this month. So I'd like to see where those things come out, but I know the groups that we work with at NACA, we're not seeing a lot of that.
Okay. So, John, I just heard you acknowledge, quote, things could happen and they do happen, but it doesn't sound like, in your view, that suggests any kind of widespread fraud like that's being alleged right now.
No, I don't see that. Again, if they're talking again specifically to what the Secretary had to say, Secretary Hegseth, looking at pass-through contracts, one of the things that this narrative has started to talk about is it's put all the pressure on the 8A program, or the 8A participant. But when you think about federal contracting, it actually takes three to tango in these larger areas. You have the 8A contractor. Usually within the federal government, you definitely have a contracting officer. A lot of times they'll have small business officers that we call OSDBUs, and there's the large prime. We're talking about 8A program. On direct awards, or again, those non-competitive awards that they have within the federal government, Native contractors only make up 2% of those direct awards. 98% of those actually go to these large primes that are out there that are located in Washington, D.C. So again, there's this focus on this 2% of us passing that 2% of direct awards back to those large primes that are already getting 98% of the direct awards. So again, I think this narrative has focused on us as small businesses, and these programs were designed because there's a major barrier of entry to get into federal contracting. There's a lot of reporting requirements, et cetera. So again, I'd like to see where these things come through, and like to see, again, I'm sure they have data points that'll come out with there. So again, not being too quick to judge, but trying to remind everyone that these programs were designed to make sure that these large prime organizations, had to be upfront, had to be competitive in their pricing, that there was other levers for DOD to be able to get us where we need to be in Department of War.
Thanks, John. Kevin, I'd like you to weigh in here as well and talk more about Hegseth's comment that these contractors hand the work to other businesses or they subcontract. Can you tell, how does an arrangement like that typically work?
Yeah, so thanks again for having us. And John's spot on a lot of this stuff. And to address what Secretary Hegseth is talking about would kind of also to try to guess what's in the mind of some of these folks that are making assumptions to support a particular ideology. All right, to John's point, we just haven't seen widespread fraud. We haven't seen widespread abuse of subcontracting opportunities. We haven't seen widespread abuse of sole source. Trust me when I tell you, if this administration had found widespread abuse in any of these programs, or any administration for that, they're going to let us know about it. They're going to let their constituents know. They're going to let the people that supported them, that voted them in office, know that they are out to find fraud, and here's the fraud we found, and here are the people that were parading and companies were parading through the court system to make them accountable. We just don't see any of that. You know, do all of us want to see fraud ferreted out? Yes, absolutely. Do all of us believe that it is immune from any particular type of business? No, it's not. When you look at any of these announcements that Secretary Hegseth has made or the administrator over at the SBA, just read anything they put up on social media or in paper, and the first thing usually is what their angle is. That the first thing they mention in all of these is DEI, race-based programs. Okay, that is their problem here. That is the issue that they're having. And unfortunately, where this hurts tribes, and I've said this over and over again, tribes really only have three solid sources of revenue. Three only. One, federal funds through treaty and trust responsibilities and their political relationship with the federal government. Two, if you're lucky enough to be a tribe near people, Indian gaming. And the third leg of that stool is federal contracting dollars. It is extremely important for tribes to do that. And tribes participate in the 8A program not because there's some race or ethnicity. Tribes are not racial. Tribes are sovereign entities, and their citizens are citizens of a tribe. We never think of the citizens of France or Canada or any other country, the United States, as a race. So it is improper to categorize us there. So there's a big problem. But back to your main question, the main issue here is not about the fraud and the abuse of subcontracting. What these relationships look like big contractors. It's more of an ideology issue for them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kevin. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back. We'll talk more with Kevin and John. And the phone lines are open for listeners. 1-800-99-NATIVE. President Donald Trump's rhetoric and actions about political and potential military actions in places like Venezuela, Greenland, Cuba, and Colombia harken back to an imperialistic posture not seen in more than a century. It has indigenous people both outside and inside the country concerned about the federal government's respect for sovereignty and human rights. We'll hear more on the next Native America Calling.
Repatriation is the return of ancestors and stolen culture. The Association on American Indian Affairs is hosting the 11th annual Repatriation Conference, Feeding the Fire, Advancing the Movement, in February 2026. This fully virtual conference will offer small group interactive workshops, strategies, networking, and more to advance domestic and international repatriation. More at Indian-Affairs.org. The association supports this show.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. Today we're talking about the Small Business Administration's 8A program and the Trump administration's scrutiny of this program. You can join us with comments or questions by calling 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. And one of our guests today, John Panamaroff, is the co-chair of the Native American Contractors Association. And John, the other news here is the SBA has suspended 1,000 contractors from the 8A program. And I'm curious to know, I mean, you and Kevin have touched on this already, but just how big an economic driver is this program for tribes, Native Hawaiians, Alaska Native corporations? How widely used is it? And let's also not forget individual small business owners who might also participate in the program.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Before I get to some of the economic component of it, but you mentioned right at the offset there about 1,000 organizations being suspended for additional review in the first round of the SBA audits. I think there's around 4,900 total organizations, from individual to tribally owned, ANC-owned organizations, Native Hawaiian-owned. I believe out of those 1,000, only about 40, 42-ish were within the tribal organization program. So again, and many of them that I've talked to, it was a uploading data, information, missing something. So again, I think about half of those at minimum that I know of should be able to show that, again, there was more of a clerical error there. But again, we'll let that wash out where it is. But looking at, again, some of the economic drivers for both individual and tribally owned, I guess I'd start with kind of a personal story. I'm a rural kid from Alaska, right? I grew up with no running water or electricity for many years of my life. I was homeless 3 different times growing up. And what the 8A program was allowed us to do in Alaska is to build up scholarship programs and build up areas to where, again, we could continue to look forward and think 7 generations ahead, allowing people like myself who, early on wouldn't be able to be a Native American CEO of an organization to really be able to drive it. And that's some of that qualitative piece that I don't think we talk enough about, that we don't see enough, that community impact, where it has generational effect and can continue to drive that forward. One of the things Kevin talked about, again, and he was absolutely right on, that is Native American contracting is one of the main 3 pillars of economic success within Indian country and within our communities. This is a program that's actually worked and given us a hand up, not a handout. When you think about the fiduciary trust responsibility that the federal government has, wouldn't we rather be looking at programs to allow us to work for the dollars, have that government-to-government relationship, and instead of looking at just indirect dollars with grants? Now, don't get me wrong. Those programs and everything that's done at Interior and IHS, and those are absolutely essential and needed. But these are programs that allow us to have that economic self-determination, to really be able to drive careers, to drive better ability for us, and allow us to be self-determining. Because again, as we just saw reaffirmed with the general welfare component that Treasury just did, and congratulations to Treasurer Beach and others and everybody involved in pushing that through, these are areas that, again, allow us to be the sovereign nations that we are, to drive economic commerce, and honestly, to be one of the leading drivers of employment in some of our most rural places throughout the nation. This is a larger component of that. And when we specifically look within the Department of War, DOD, whatever you, as we look in those areas, we as a Native community, we serve per capita higher than any other group. So we have a long-term relationship with our military. And again, that support. We are so proud of the work that we're doing, to being part of the larger government solution, and again, to be nation building amongst ourselves.
All right. Thank you, John. Let's go to the phones. We've already got a caller on the line. This is Clarice, who is listening online in Sitka, Alaska. Good morning, Clarice. You are on the air.
Good morning. I'm a Sea-Alaska and Shiatica shareholder, and my question is for John. Recently, 15 Angska Alaska Native executives and board members endorsed Republican Dan Sullivan for Senate over Alaska Native Mary Patola. Have you been in contact with Senator Sullivan about 8A contracting? And what kind of support do you expect from him, considering he voted for Hegseth and is a Trump supporter? The second question is for both panelists. Since the Small Business Administration will no longer approve the use of socially disadvantaged narratives as a way to get into the program, is that going to exclude tribal and Angsta corporations? And also, they said that they will consider eligibility on whether an individual has been a victim of illegal or radical DEI policies or illegal affirmative action policies. So this seems like a flip to actually rewarding people for any sort of perceived discrimination. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well.
All right, Clarice, thank you so much. Really great questions. John, go ahead and chime in. Have you talked to Senator Sullivan? And if so, where's he at with regard to the 8A program right now?
Yeah, on the Political race, I know Dan and Mary very well, both great people. But back to the specific question on what Senator Sullivan's doing, I can tell you that Senator Sullivan has been a champion within the 8A program. I can tell you that he is somebody that's worked very closely with NACA, the Native American Contractors Association, very specifically in talking to Secretary Hagstaff, to talking to Secretary Loeffler within the SBA, and has been a major champion of pushing that forward. So I can tell you I've seen that personally. I've been in those meetings. I've seen those memos, and I've seen that. I also know that Dan has been very adamant when anytime he was approving any of the subsecretaries within the agency in our military, that he asked specifically about the utilization of 8A and where those things are going. So again, that's not a political statement. Those are just facts that I've seen, boots on the ground and working within that.
All right. Thanks, John. And Kevin, I'd like you to weigh in as well, because the second part of Clarice's question had to do with how eligibility requirements could potentially be impacted, especially with regard to ANCs.
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously Clarice is plugged into what's going on. So she referenced two things, that being one of them. Yeah, we are going to be impacted by not only what we see Hegseth doing and Administrator over at SBA doing, but also by some of the actions that they're putting out internally. A waiver, a lack of ability of anybody at the SBA to use any waivers will have a significant impact on tribal participation and entry into the program. Just for an example, you usually get into the program, you need a 2-year past performance. There's a 2-year past performance requirement. However, under the regulations, which is the law, okay, it's not discretionary, it's the law, once the regulations are official, that they can waive the 2-year past performance requirement for tribes, based on a couple other things happening, tribal support, community support dollars, all that kind of stuff. I'm just covering it from a high level, but that is an absolute entry point into the program that now theoretically, or not maybe theoretically, actually could not happen. Participation in existing contracts, speaking to waivers, like take the non-manufacturer rule. If a small business doesn't make what the government's buying, say a computer, specifically a Dell computer, they can contract with a small business to be the supplier to the government. They're the non-manufacturer of what the government's looking for that's not made by small business. There are tribes that do that, okay, that they buy the Dell computers from Dell because it's not selling directly to the government for some reason, and they ship it, to the government through some kind of procurement. That's a waiver. Once you eliminate a waiver, that particular contract now is dead in the water. They can't do it. They can't work it. They can't continue to operate, even though regulatory language in the law allows them to do it. So there's a bunch of this going on with this non-waiver authority, something we haven't talked about. The FAR Council's rewriting the FAR Part 19. Some of the stuff that we're seeing there, and we've been working the Hill significantly on this all year long, will have a major impact on the ability of small business, and specifically tribal small businesses, to continue to operate as a small business federal contractor for the federal government. And then finally, the last thing that Clarice touched on there, which is completely outrageous, is the SBA guidance memo that came out a week ago that, dumps on the 8A program, but says that now Caucasian people, white people that have been disadvantaged by prior affirmative actions and DEI programs are now disadvantaged people that would be eligible to participate in the program. I've never heard such nonsense in my life, and all of these things are like death by 1,000 cuts. They're just slowly just kind of hurting the program to the damage, and will have significant damage on our tribal communities.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. John, I want to go back to you because I want to, again, focus right now specifically on what's happening in the Defense Department, because that's where Pete Hegseth is going after the 8A program. And can you give us some examples of Native firms, 8A firms, that are doing defense contracting work? What types of contracts are these specifically, defense-minded?
Well, it's a wide cloth, again, from professional services to, creating widgets for some of our warfighters, from military vehicles to jets to missiles, et cetera. And so it really is a large gambit. It'd be hard for me to kind of get specifically one-on-one with some of those contracts. But what I can tell you is, again, looking at all of those different contracts, from maybe be training exercise to our special forces, be it to, again, building specific areas of our warfighter, from jets to tanks to other areas, that I know for a fact, at least amongst the many Native organizations that I've been a part of personally, as well as our membership at NACA, plus our non-NACA members that are out there doing amazing work, is we see the past performance. They call them CPARs. And again, we've been trying really hard not to get into the ABC soup of federal contracting, but looking at the past performance of our organizations, back to one of my original comments, you look at the amazing past performance that we're doing. The people, the military, our military counterparts are saying in those past performances, they're doing exceptional work. They're doing the work that allows us to, again, be generational in building these programs, training programs, get dollars back into education for our communities, while still making sure that we are meeting that full and obligation. A lot of times these are organizations that we're building that, again, will make it to where we do allow some competition for those large primes that are in there. And I'm not here trying to say that all of them are doing negative work. We do partner with them at times. But again, it's allowing us to, again, build the methodology, building core capabilities, building things that, again, will allow us to be part of that larger system. When we look at DOD, when we look at the Department of War, when we look at what we're trying to be and where we are, we take a lot of pride in being part of that solution for us as America, and we have a lot of pride in that.
Thanks, John. Kevin, I want to go back again to this question about fraud, because back in 2019, the Los Angeles Times reported on over $300 million in government contracts that were going to fake Cherokee groups. And, that's the kind of thing right now, especially with the current climate among Native American people with regard to identity and this whole issue with pretend Indianism and such. What sort of protections are in place in the program to prevent instances of fraud like that article alleged?
Yeah. I can't help but think, I'm sorry, I've got to say this, but a lot of these reports are cherry picking, and there's a particular strategy or angle that they're taking in order to bring that out. I mean, look, the program, entry into the program, and for a tribe to be, eligible to participate in the program and have any of its companies to later be a federal procurement, company in the 8A program, requires a bunch of hurdles that they have to get through, a lot of documentation that they have to supply. It is not easy. You can ask any attorney at the former law firm I used to work for, Polera Mazza, that does that all the time. There is a significant amount of checks and balances and things that have to happen before you're eligible and participate in the program. Look, there are fraudsters in every single industry that will find ways around that to exploit somebody or a system, and it is not fair. Okay.
Right. And Kevin, let me just
go back 6 years and pick something out and use that as the flavor of the day today.
And you know what this really makes me think of, and what I'm not hearing a lot of talk about right now, but let's say you have a white guy, successful person, wealthy. He can set up an 8A firm, put maybe his wife or another family member as the 51% owner, and he can essentially do the same subcontracting that we're hearing so much with regard to Native people. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And let's not the elephant in the room here. And John mentioned this before about the 98%, 2%, breakdown of contracts that are going out that are sole source. There is plenty of bad actors that working for large businesses, large federal contractors, huge amounts of money that have been misappropriated and fraudulently acquired and used. And we don't hear anything about that. We don't hear them talking about suspending programs and sole source awards to Lockheed Martin, to Boeing, to Northrop Grumman, all these other businesses because of some allegation or belief without a whole lot of proof that there's systemic fraud in the program. It just doesn't make any sense at all. That's why we have to go back on what the original language all these folks use when they talk about this program, and it's DEI race-based. That's what this is about, and they're using the word fraud and the word systemic fraud, the phrase, as a way to justify their way to take a program down like this.
We've got about a minute before we go to break. John, I want to bring you back in. And what happens next year? What are the next steps in determining 8A's future, and what are you most worried about?
I think that, again, what we need to do is, first of all, as Indian country, through our tribes, our ANCs, our NHOs, we need to continue to band together to make sure that we have a cohesive narrative and cohesive kind of mantra to go back and show everything that Kevin and I are talking about, showing how we are great value, how we continue to show good work, how we continue to be some of the best and brightest for both our military and, again, through agencies wide. I think that's super important. Two, I think we got to continue to show how this is, again, making it to where the reminder of that fiduciary trust responsibility that the federal government has to Indian country and to our people and to our communities, and showing how that is supporting us, and also supporting many of our small businesses in some of our most rural areas.
All right. Stay with us, listeners. We'll be right back.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Kaufman & Associates is a Native-owned and led consulting firm, supporting Native communities with culturally grounded solutions to shape Indigenous futures. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
You're listening to Native America Calling. Phone number to join the conversation is 1-800-996-2848. Let's get another caller on the line. We had a really good caller earlier from Sitka, Alaska, with great questions. We'd like to hear from some more of you out there. Again, that number, 1-800-996-2848. And let's pivot now and bring in another guest, and we'll talk about alleged abuse of the 8A program that was uncovered by a journalist's investigation. And to do that, joining us from Washington, D.C. is Nick Gruby. He is an investigative reporter at Honolulu Civil Beat. Nick, hello, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, you did an extensive investigation for Honolulu Civil Beat and ProPublica about an individual named Christopher Dawson, a Native Hawaiian contractor who won massive contracts in the 8A program and was under federal investigation when he died. Who was this individual, and what was the fraud he was allegedly engaged in?
Yeah, Christopher Dawson, as you noted, was a Native Hawaiian defense contractor and a participant of the 8A program. And he participated in the part of the program that I think you guys have been discussing most of today, which is related to tribes, Alaska Native corporations, and Native Hawaiian organizations. And in a lot of ways, he had become a prominent figure for the NHO portion of the program. NHO, of course, is a Native Hawaiian organization, and had amassed hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts using the special contracting privileges. But, you know, what came with those privileges was this promise that the money that he made from that was supposed to go back to helping the Native Hawaiian community. And what we found through our investigation and review of various records, including some from the DOJ and the SBA itself, was that Christopher Dawson was essentially being accused of pocketing millions and millions of dollars that were supposed to go back to the Native Hawaiian community.
Was he convicted of any crime ultimately?
No, he died before any charges were filed, but the DOJ is continuing to pursue its case against his estate, and they're going after various assets. So things that he purchased using this money that was alleged to have been stolen and embezzled from Native Hawaiians. 4 different properties worth millions and millions of dollars. The SBA also entered into an agreement with the companies that he owned, saying, hey, he has to go, his family members who were affiliated have to go, et cetera, in order for them to stay in the 8A program.
Now, Nick, you spoke to some Native Hawaiian people for this story. For example, Robin Danner, who was an early advocate for no-bid contracting privileges to Native Hawaiians through the 8A program. What did she tell you and others with regard to this case? What are their biggest concerns?
Yeah, I think people like Robin Danner and some of the other Native Hawaiians that we interviewed for this piece were really worried about people taking advantage of the program to line their own pockets rather than use the money as it was sort of intended to be used, which was to help the Native Hawaiian people. I believe we quoted Robin Danner as saying something along the lines of, here you have a handful of people making millions of dollars off of our pain and suffering, and what they're giving back is pennies. And our reporting really sort of focused on this narrow aspect of the program, right? And that is the SBA making sure that the people who are participating in this program and getting these special contracting privileges, doing what they promised, and that is making sure that they're helping the indigenous communities that they're supposed to be serving.
Okay. Now, Christopher Dawson, he ran a private nonprofit called Native Hawaiian Corporation, and that's a business structure that's known as a Native Hawaiian organization or an NHO, and that's how he was able to get a lot of these contracts and how he was able to facilitate them. What's the overall track record, though, of this industry, the NHO industry, in terms of supporting Native Hawaiian communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's sort of interesting about Christopher Dawson's case is that NHOs are unique, right? Native Hawaiians do not have a tribal structure or, for instance, there's no Native Hawaiian council that makes decisions for Native Hawaiians as a whole in terms of, what is their membership? What does that look like? So instead, what was created were these nonprofit corporations that sort of were acting as stand-ins for tribes. And that sort of leaves a lot of space for potential wrongdoing, which is what Christopher Dawson is alleged to have done. And so, what we were trying to sort of figure out is like, why did that happen? How could this happen? And was there anything that could have been done to prevent that sort of alleged abuse from taking place? And if so, what might that look like? And, in terms of knowing how much money is actually going back to the Native Hawaiian community, there's no real way to measure that. And I think that's one of the findings of our reporting is that the SBA has struggled for many years to actually track this information and sort of provide it in a way that shows that the participants in the program are doing what they say they're doing, which, in this case has sort of raised some questions and also, and as a result, opened up the program to further scrutiny and potential attack.
Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, she cited this criminal investigation of Christopher Dawson for her probe into the 8A program. What can you tell us, Nick, about her role in the administration's work right now to suspend contracts to Native businesses?
Yeah, I think Senator Ernst is sort of jumping on the anti-DEI bandwagon that you sort of see the Trump administration doing with the 8A program, with Secretary Hegseth and his announcement. And, she grabbed onto the Dawson case as an example of something that might be wrong with the 8A program. But that was just one small sliver. I think she's focused a lot of her attention on these things that have been described as pass-throughs. which is a sort of a separate issue than what Dawson is accused of doing, because the allegations surrounding him, again, mostly have to do with whether he was taking money away from the Native Hawaiians he was supposed to be serving. And so, and this is what I was talking about in terms of these sorts of incidents or sort of being used as ammunition by opponents of a program that has come under scrutiny numerous times over the past couple of decades over allegations of fraud, waste, or abuse. And now what we're seeing is sort of a very thinly veiled attack on the program by the current administration and some of its allies, again, focused on what they consider anti-DEI measures.
Okay. Now, you recently published a follow-up to this story in Civil Beat, and you talked with Representative Ed Case from Hawaii about walking a very fine line about voicing concerns about the SBA program, but also not jumping on board with the Trump administration's anti-DEI campaign. What did he tell you about what he thinks is going on with the 8A program?
Yeah, I think Ed Case, when I interviewed him, he sort of comes at it from, two perspectives. One, he saw what happened with the Christopher Dawson case, and it raised concerns for him. He likes the 8A program. He thinks it does a lot of good generally. And then when we're talking about Native Hawaiian organizations in particular, he also sees a lot of potential there. And he thinks it's sort of rooted in noble ideals of providing these contracting privileges to people who might not have had as much access to the federal marketplace as others, right? And so that's where he starts. But what he wants to make sure is that the money, again, that's going to the Native Hawaiian organization firms, that it's actually making its way back into the Native Hawaiian community. So he wants to sort of follow on those very narrowly specific allegations that were raised about Christopher Dawson, but he wants to do it in a way that, again, doesn't get weaponized by the current administration as it attempts to take out this program that it considers to be a diversity, equity, and inclusion handout, right? And so that's the fine line that he's trying to walk. And that's one of the reasons why when he raised concerns about this, he didn't go directly to the administration, but instead he went to the Small Business Administration's Inspector General, hoping for at least an independent review of what's going on here.
Okay. Nick, great reporting. Absolutely fabulous. Can we expect maybe a follow-up here in the weeks to come as more information comes out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this story definitely isn't going away, especially given the administration's decision to sort of attack it and put it on the front lines in ways that I think were a bit surprising, including some of the people who I talked to. I mean, this has been one of their big concerns going forward is what's going to happen with this Trump administration, and are they going to essentially try to eliminate this program that's been around for decades?
All right. Thank you again. Nick Gruby, investigative reporter at Honolulu Civic Beat. And Kevin, I want to go back to you again. And earlier I asked John, what's in store? What's the game plan going forward? But again, this program has been around for almost 60 years. That's a long time here. Has it faced any significant threats like this in the past?
So actually, program's been around longer than that, but not like this. Okay, this is a pretty scary attack on the program. And in back maybe 15 years ago, there was a lot of congressional inquiry into this program and into tribal participation into the program. And in the Senator McCaskill and Senator John McCain years, there were hearings on it and looked deeply into it and, tried to find things wrong with it and make corrections, but nothing ever came out of any of that would tank the program or make anybody believe that the program wasn't a valuable asset both to the federal government and to tribal communities. So this is very unique, and so why we're, the hair on the back of our necks is standing straight up, because it is very concerning, because there's a lot of allegations being made, assumptions being made off of one or two cases that are very egregious. I agree, okay, but hardly paint a broad-based picture on this is what the entire 8A community looks like, and this is what you should expect from those, the actions that you saw from a Chris Dawson and Dawson Industries. That's just not fair. Tribal Indian country is willing to sit down and have a dialogue about this through tribal consultation and other things, but nobody's asking us what we think. Nobody's coming to any of these communities and Indian country as a whole, the associations, and saying, hey, let's have a good dialogue about this and see if we can't work this out to where it's a win for everybody. No, we don't see any of that going on. We just see everybody, just going, finding one shiny object and just running for it and saying we all look like this.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. John Panamaroff, I want to go back to you because, we have listeners all across the country who tune in every day, and some of them, maybe they work for a larger tribally owned or ANC owned 8A firm, or maybe they're just small business owners just getting started and they're interested in becoming participants of the 8A program, or maybe they're just getting started. Maybe they've gotten like one or two contracts and they're seeing this news and they're hearing this show and they're thinking, geez, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my job? What does it mean for my business? What do you want to tell that person, John?
A couple things. One, we keep having this narrative of that, especially the tribal organizations are DEI. It's just not. Right? We have shown our government-to-government relationship. We have shown that. We have this from the Commerce Clause. We have these long-standing areas there. And this recognition, again, just happened with general welfare within the Department of Treasury. This has been recognized by the SBA. This has been recognized widely that there's this government-to-government relationship. So I don't know why we continue to try to bring back this DEI claim when it comes to our tribal organizations. So that's narrative one. Two, we have these conversations about, again, kind of cherry picking, as Kevin said before. There have been instances that people are going back and looking at the program to make sure that there isn't fraud, waste, and abuse. But we keep talking about things from 2 years ago, 6 years ago, those types of things. Since that time, the SBA has went through making sure that even within the socially economically disadvantaged for individual 8As, that people had to come back in, show the narrative, again, that why they would qualify for the program, right? You'd mentioned where, somebody could just have their spouse enter into the program because of, them being female or a person of color, et cetera, those kind of areas. Well, again, the SBA had already put in parameters 2-3 years ago to, again, go back through those pieces. So, again, we're bringing up things that, again, they had went through to show and bring through there. What I will say is let's remember that this is an industry that has a large barrier of entry. And I implore all of our small businesses not to give up on what we need to do for our warfighter, to not give up on what we need to do for our American people, because, again, small business is the lifeblood of us as indigenous people, as well as the lifeblood of America in its totality. We need to continue to push the envelope. We need to continue to provide good jobs and be part of the communities that we come from. If you look at the economics of how our world has changed, even here within America, we went from, giving inheritance of wealth from our large or communities by passing on businesses. Well, that went to the big box stores. And now all of a sudden, and so people just had jobs. Now it looks like we're going in larger into these larger areas. So what I would tell our listeners, don't give up. We need you, and we need to continue to push forward.
All right. And with that, we have reached the end of our hour. So I want to thank our three guests who joined the show today, Kevin, Alice, John Panamaroff, and Nick Gruby. Please join us again tomorrow for a Native perspective on what is being called America's modern-day imperialism. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.